I was holding my daughter, the daughter I carried for 9 months, the daughter I felt kick inside me, the daughter I gave birth to, and my best friend of 15 years was telling me I couldn't take her home. She had her hand on the baby's, car seat and tears streaming down her face, and she said the words that would shatter our friendship and destroy my life. "I'm sorry, Sarah, but she's mine. I'm keeping her. You need to leave." I stood there in the hospital parking lot, my body still bleeding from childbirth, my arms empty, my heart completely broken. And I realized in that moment that I didn't actually know the person I'd trusted with my life. I didn't know the person I'd made the biggest sacrifice of my life for. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm 34 years old. I'm going to tell you the story of how I lost the baby I gave birth to, how I fought a legal battle against my best friend, and how I survived one of the most painful betrayals imaginable. If you're watching this on Tinty Tales, please like and subscribe right now. This story will shock you. This story will make you question everything about friendship, family, and sacrifice, and you won't want to miss a single second of it. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I want to know how far this story travels. To understand how I ended up in that parking lot, holding a baby that wasn't legally mine, I need to take you back to the beginning. I need to tell you about how this all started, about the friendship that made me believe anything was possible, and about the dream that would become a nightmare. I met Jessica Chen in college. We were both 19 years old, both freshmen at the University of Washington, both living in the same dorm building. I was in pre-med, completely overwhelmed by organic chemistry and calculus. Jessica was studying business, and she was the most confident person I'd ever met. She walked into the common room of our dorm floor like she owned the place, and I was immediately drawn to her energy. We started studying together. Then we started eating lunch together. Then we started going to parties together. And somewhere along the way, we became sisters. Not by blood, but by choice. We knew each other's deepest secrets, our biggest fears, our wildest dreams. We supported each other through bad relationships, family problems, career transitions. We were inseparable. After college, we both stayed in Seattle. Jessica started her own business consulting firm and became incredibly successful. She married a wonderful man named Daniel when we were 27. Daniel was handsome, intelligent, kind, everything Jessica deserved. I was her maid of honor. I gave a toast that had everyone crying because I talked about how I'd always known Daniel was the one for her the moment she introduced him to me. "He's going to be my brother," I said, raising my glass. "And Sarah," Jessica said, pulling me into a hug afterward, "you're going to be my sister forever. Nothing will ever change that." I believed her. I believed that no matter what happened, Jessica and I would be there for each other. We would always have each other's backs. We were soulmates in the way that only best friends can be. My life, meanwhile, was very different from Jessica's. I had never married. I had been in several relationships, but nothing had lasted. I was an anesthesiologist, which meant my schedule was incredibly demanding. I worked long hours at the hospital, often working nights and weekends. It left little time for dating, little time for building a serious relationship, and virtually no time for thinking about starting a family. By the time I was 32, I'd made peace with the idea that I probably wouldn't have biological children. My family had initially been disappointed. My parents had always expected me to give them grandchildren, but they'd eventually accepted that this might not be part of my journey. Then Jessica and Daniel decided they wanted to have children. Jessica and Daniel had been trying for 3 years to have a baby when she finally told me the truth. They'd been to every fertility specialist in Seattle. They'd done IVF 6 times. Daniel's sperm count was fine. Jessica's eggs were fine. But something about their biological chemistry together just didn't work. Jessica couldn't get pregnant, and after 3 years and hundreds of thousands of dollars, they were devastated. I remember the night she told me. We were at our favorite restaurant, the Italian place on Pike Street where we'd been going since college. Jessica ordered a glass of wine, something she hadn't done in years because she was still holding on to hope, and she started crying. "I can't have a baby," she said. "Daniel and I have decided to accept it. We've looked into adoption, but the process is long and expensive, and there's no guarantee. And honestly, Sarah, I just wanted to experience pregnancy. I wanted to feel my baby grow inside me. I wanted to give Daniel a biological child. And I can't. I can't do that for him. And it's killing me." I held her hand across the table, and I listened. I listened to her talk about the grief of infertility, about the shame she felt, about the guilt toward Daniel, about the way her body had betrayed her. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I know you probably don't want to hear this. You've probably got your own things going on, and here I am dumping this on you." "Jessica," I said, "you're my best friend. I want to hear this. I want to help if I can." And then she looked at me, and her eyes changed. Something shifted in her expression. She took a deep breath and said the words that would change everything. "Sarah, I have a question, and I want you to really think about it before you answer. And if you say no, that's completely okay. I won't be upset. We'll never talk about it again if you don't want to." "Okay," I said. "What's the question?" "Would you consider being a surrogate for Daniel and me?" The words hung in the air between us. I sat there, my fork frozen halfway to my mouth, trying to process what she'd just asked. "I know it's a lot," Jessica continued quickly. "I know it's crazy, but you're healthy. You're fertile. Well, presumably fertile. You're someone I trust completely, and honestly, I can't think of anyone else I'd want to carry my child." I set my fork down carefully. "You're asking me to get pregnant," I said slowly, "with your baby, and give birth to it, and then give it to you?" "I know how that sounds," Jessica said. "I know it's a huge ask, but yes, that's what I'm asking." I didn't answer immediately. I sat with the question. I thought about what it would mean. 9 months of pregnancy, the physical toll on my body, the hormonal changes, the morning sickness, and the back pain and the swollen ankles and all the other joys of pregnancy that I'd never experienced. And then, after all of that, giving the baby to my best friend. But there was also something beautiful about the question. There was something noble and selfless about it. Jessica was asking me to be a part of bringing her child into the world. She was asking me to give her the gift of motherhood in a way that nothing else could. "Can I think about it?" I asked. "Of course," Jessica said. "Take all the time you need." But honestly, I knew my answer before I even left that restaurant. I knew what I was going to say. Because Jessica had always been there for me. She had driven me to the hospital when I was in a car accident. She had sat with me when my grandfather died. She had listened to all my fears and my failures and my dreams without judgment, and now she was asking me to do something that would change my life forever. How could I say no to that? I called her the next day. "Yes," I said. "I'll be your surrogate." She screamed. I've never heard my friend scream like that before. It was pure joy, pure relief, pure gratitude all mixed together. She came over to my apartment and we cried and hugged and talked for hours about what this would mean. We talked about the legal process, about the medical procedures, about the physical toll it would take on my body. "I want you to know how grateful I am," Jessica said. "I want you to know that I understand what you're doing for us, and I want you to know that we will take care of you. Anything you need, we will provide." "I'm not doing this for money," I said. "I know you're not," Jessica replied. "But you should know that we're incredibly grateful. This is the greatest gift anyone has ever given us." I felt a surge of warmth in my chest. I felt like I was doing something meaningful, something noble. I was going to give my best friend the one thing she wanted most in the world. I was going to be the hero in her story. I didn't realize yet that I was also setting myself up to be the victim in mine. The legal process for surrogacy was more complicated than I'd expected. Jessica and Daniel hired a lawyer who specialized in reproductive law, and she explained everything to me. There would be contracts. There would be medical evaluations. There would be genetic testing. There would be consultations with a psychologist to make sure I was emotionally prepared for what I was about to do. The psychologist appointment was particularly interesting. Her name was Dr. Patricia Okonkwo, and she was a kind woman in her 60s who had worked with many surrogacy situations. She asked me careful questions about my motivation, about my mental health, about my support system. "Sarah," she said, about halfway through our session, "I want to make sure you understand what you're signing up for. Many surrogates experience emotional attachment to the baby they carry. It's completely natural. They've felt the baby move inside them. They've been through labor and delivery. And then they have to hand that baby over to the intended parents. Some surrogates describe it as the most difficult moment of their lives." "I understand," I said, "but Jessica is my best friend. This is her baby. I'm just helping her have a child." "Biologically, it's your baby," Dr. Okonkwo said gently. "You're going to carry the child. Your DNA will be part of the child because you're providing the egg." "I know," I said, "but emotionally, it's not my baby. It's Jessica and Daniel's baby. They're the ones who want to be parents. I'm just helping." Dr. Okonkwo made a note in her file. "I think you should do some additional counseling before you proceed," she said. "I think you should talk to someone about what this experience might bring up for you. I'm not saying you shouldn't do this. I'm just saying that you should be prepared for the emotional complexity of it." I agreed to do some additional counseling sessions, and I found a therapist named Dr. Michael Chen, who specialized in fertility and reproductive trauma. I saw him once a month for the 6 months leading up to my insemination. Dr. Chen asked me similar questions to Dr. Okonkwo, but he went deeper. He asked me about my family of origin. He asked me about my feelings about motherhood. He asked me if I'd ever wanted to have children. "I don't think so," I told him. "I mean, I haven't really thought about it much. I've been focused on my career, and I've never been in a relationship where I felt like starting a family made sense." "But now you're going to be pregnant," Dr. Chen said. "You're going to experience pregnancy, and after you give birth, you're going to hand your biological child to someone else. How do you feel about that?" "I feel like I'm doing something good," I said. "I feel like I'm helping my best friend achieve her dream." "That's a beautiful sentiment," Dr. Chen said. "But I'm asking how you feel about the part where you give up the baby." I sat with that question for a moment. Did I feel anything about giving up the baby? Not yet. The baby wasn't real to me yet. The baby was an abstract concept, a theoretical future person. I couldn't imagine feeling attached to someone who didn't exist yet. "I think I'll be fine," I said finally. "It's not like I'm losing a child I wanted to keep. I'm just temporarily carrying a child for someone else." Dr. Chen wrote something in his notes. I would later realize that he had documented his concerns about my readiness for this experience. But at the time, I didn't think much of it. I just wanted to move forward with what I was doing. The medical process was intense. I had to go through a battery of tests: blood work, genetic screening, physical examinations. I had to be evaluated by a reproductive endocrinologist to make sure my body was healthy enough to carry a pregnancy. I had to take hormones to prepare my body for the implantation of the embryo. Jessica and Daniel had had several embryos created through IVF, but they couldn't use Jessica's eggs because of her own biological issues. Instead, they used a donor egg, a young woman Jessica and Daniel had selected from a fertility clinic. Daniel's sperm was used, so the embryo would have his DNA, but none of Jessica's and none of mine. Wait, let me correct that. The original plan was for the embryo to have Daniel's DNA and Jessica's DNA, but Jessica couldn't provide that, so they used a donor egg, which meant the embryo would have Daniel's DNA but not Jessica's and not mine. It would have the DNA of a complete stranger. This was important information, and I want to make sure you understand it, because it will become very important later in this story. The first embryo transfer didn't work. I took all the hormones, my body prepared itself for pregnancy, and then the embryo was transferred into my uterus, and then nothing happened. A week later, I got my period, and we all felt the devastation of that failure. Jessica cried when I called her to tell her the transfer hadn't worked. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I'm so sorry you went through all of that for nothing." "It's okay," I said. We knew there was only about a 40% chance of success with the first transfer. We can try again. And we did try again. The second transfer also failed. And then the third. By the fourth transfer, I was exhausted. My body was exhausted from all the hormones. My emotions were exhausted from the repeated failures. I was ready to give up. But Jessica begged me to try one more time. "Please, Sarah," she said. "Please, I know this is hard, but we have one more embryo left. After this one, we're going to have to start over with the whole IVF process. And it's going to be so expensive. Please, just one more time." So I did it one more time. And on the fifth embryo transfer, it worked. I found out I was pregnant on a Tuesday morning. I took a pregnancy test at home. Not the first test I'd taken during this process. But this time there were 2 lines. 2 clear, undeniable lines. I was pregnant. I called Jessica immediately. I just said, "Jessica, it worked. I'm pregnant." And she screamed. She screamed so loud that I had to pull the phone away from my ear. I could hear her calling Daniel, could hear her crying and laughing at the same time. "Sarah, oh my God, Sarah," she kept saying. "You did it. You did it. We're going to be parents. We're going to be parents." I hung up and looked at the pregnancy test in my hand. 2 pink lines. A baby was growing inside me. A baby that was genetically related to Daniel, but not to Jessica, and not to me. A baby that would belong to Jessica and Daniel, but would grow inside my body. I felt something shift inside me in that moment. It was subtle at first, but I felt it. It was a sense of connection, a sense of attachment, a sense of ownership. This was my baby now. This baby was inside my body, and I could feel the beginning of love forming in my heart. But I pushed that feeling down. I told myself that wasn't my baby. I told myself that I was just helping Jessica have a baby. I told myself that the attachment I was feeling would fade once the baby was born, and I handed it over. I was very wrong about that. The first trimester was relatively smooth. I had morning sickness, which was miserable, but otherwise I felt fine. Jessica was ecstatic. She bought pregnancy books. She started decorating a nursery. She and Daniel chose a name: Lily if the baby was a girl, Oliver if it was a boy, and Jessica started referring to the baby by name. "How's little Lily today?" She would text me. Or, "Is Oliver kicking around in there?" I appreciated her enthusiasm, but I also found it slightly unsettling. There was something about the way Jessica was talking about the baby that felt different from how a woman talks about her own pregnancy. She wasn't tentative. She wasn't uncertain. She was certain. She was sure this baby was hers. At my 12-week ultrasound, the technician confirmed that everything was looking good. The baby had a strong heartbeat. All the measurements were normal. Jessica had asked to be in the ultrasound room with me, and she was crying as she watched the image of the baby on the screen. "That's my daughter," she said, squeezing my hand. "That's my baby." I felt something twist in my chest, something that might have been jealousy, or might have been love, or might have been both. The baby on the screen was already a person to Jessica, already her daughter. And yes, I knew this was the plan. I knew this was supposed to be Jessica's baby. But somewhere, in a part of my heart that I didn't want to acknowledge, I was wondering what it would feel like to keep her. I pushed the thought away. The second trimester was when I really started to feel the pregnancy. The morning sickness subsided, and I entered a period of relative calm. My belly grew. I started to show. Colleagues at the hospital started asking when I was due. I had to explain that I was a surrogate, which led to complicated conversations about my relationship with the intended parents. "That's so generous of you," people would say. I could never do that. I'd get too attached. "I won't," I would respond. "It's not my baby." But even as I said it, I wasn't sure it was true. Around week 20, Jessica and I found out the baby was a girl. We decided to wait and not tell Daniel, so Jessica could tell him the news when she got home. I remember sitting in the ultrasound room with Jessica, watching the technician point out the baby's anatomy, seeing the confirmation that this was a girl, and I felt such an overwhelming surge of emotion that I had to excuse myself to the bathroom and cry. Why was I crying? I wasn't sure. Was it happiness for Jessica? Was it sadness for myself? Was it grief over a future I would never have? A daughter I would never raise? I didn't know. I just knew that something inside me was breaking. At my appointment with Dr. Chen that week, I told him about my reaction to the ultrasound. It seems like you're having some complicated feelings about this experience, he said gently. I'm fine, I said. I was just being emotional. Pregnancy hormones. Sarah, Dr. Chen said, I want to gently point out that you're experiencing something that many surrogates experience. You're carrying a baby. Your body is changing. Your hormones are affecting your emotions. It's very common for surrogates to develop attachment to the baby they're carrying, even when they intellectually understand that the baby belongs to someone else. But Jessica is my best friend, I said. I want this for her. I'm not having regrets about being a surrogate. I'm not saying you're having regrets, Dr. Chen said. I'm saying that you might be experiencing some emotions that are normal and valid, and I think it would be helpful for you to process those emotions rather than push them down. I didn't go back to see Dr. Chen after that appointment. I felt like he was suggesting that I was somehow failing at being a surrogate, that I wasn't emotionally equipped to handle what I'd signed up for. I didn't want to hear more of that. I wanted to just get through the pregnancy without thinking too hard about what I was doing. The third trimester was harder. My belly was enormous. I couldn't sleep on my stomach anymore. My feet swelled. My back hurt constantly. I was working full-time as an anesthesiologist, which meant I was on my feet for long hours, and by the end of my shift, I was in so much pain that I could barely walk to my car. Jessica was taking good care of me, though. She brought me food. She gave me massages. She came to my prenatal appointments with me. She was more present and supportive than I think my actual mother would have been if she were still alive. My mother had died when I was 23. She had breast cancer, and she was gone within 2 years of her diagnosis. Losing her had been devastating, and it was one of the reasons Jessica meant so much to me. In many ways, Jessica had become my family. Around week 35, I started having some complications. I developed gestational diabetes, which I had to manage with diet and exercise. Then I developed preeclampsia, which was more serious. My blood pressure was elevated. I had protein in my urine. The doctors were concerned, and I was told that I might need to be induced early. Jessica was terrified. You're going to be okay, right? She kept asking. The baby's going to be okay? Yes, I assured her. I'm going to be fine. The baby is going to be fine. This is a common complication, and it's manageable. But honestly, I wasn't entirely sure that was true. I had read the medical literature on preeclampsia. I knew the risks. I knew that in severe cases, it could progress to eclampsia, which could be life-threatening. I was scared, but I was also in a strange mental place. Part of me, the part that had been pushing down all these complicated feelings, was thinking that if something happened to me, at least Jessica would get her baby. At least the whole thing wouldn't be for nothing. At least the sacrifice I was making would have meant something. I'm ashamed to admit that I had that thought, but I did. And it's important that I'm honest with you about the mental state I was in during that time, because it helps explain what happened next. At 38 weeks, my doctor decided to induce me. My blood pressure was continuing to rise, and they didn't want to risk complications. Jessica and Daniel came to the hospital with me. Jessica held my hand during labor. She was there for every contraction, every moment of pain. I was in labor for 18 hours. 18 hours of intense, soul-crushing pain. At one point, I was screaming so loudly that a nurse came in and asked if I wanted an epidural. I'd been trying to do this naturally, but after 15 hours of labor, I was done trying. I got the epidural, and finally, the pain became manageable. And then, finally, at 11:47 p.m., after all those hours of labor, my daughter was born. They placed her on my chest. She was covered in vernix and fluid and blood. She was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. She was 8 pounds, 3 ounces. She had a full head of dark hair. She opened her eyes and looked at me. And in that moment, every single thing I'd told myself about not getting attached, about this being Jessica's baby, about me just being a surrogate, all of that disappeared. This was my baby. My daughter. I had created her. I had carried her. I had given birth to her. And the love I felt for her in that moment was so overwhelming, so all-consuming, that I couldn't breathe. I looked at Jessica, who was crying, who was reaching toward the baby, and I felt something I'd never felt before. I felt territorial. I felt like I wanted to hold the baby and never let her go. I felt like I wanted to run away with this child and keep her for myself. And I knew in that moment that I had made a terrible mistake. After they cleaned the baby up, Jessica held her. She held my biological daughter, my baby, and she cried tears of joy. Daniel was taking pictures and video. The nurses were congratulating us. It was supposed to be the most beautiful moment of Jessica's life, the moment she became a mother. And I was lying in that hospital bed, watching another woman hold my baby, and I was dying inside. The hospital stay was 3 days. Jessica and Daniel stayed in the hospital room with me and the baby. They slept in the uncomfortable chairs. They brought me food. They helped me learn to breastfeed. They were the picture of grateful intended parents. And I was the picture of a kind surrogate who had just given them the greatest gift of their life. But internally, I was falling apart. On the first night in the hospital, I woke up at 2 a.m. unable to sleep. The baby was asleep in the bassinet next to my bed. Jessica and Daniel were asleep in the chairs. And I sat there, staring at my daughter, thinking about how I could possibly survive giving her up. I pulled up my phone and did something I shouldn't have done. I started Googling surrogate mother changing mind, and surrogate keeps baby, and can a surrogate take custody? The results were depressing. The surrogacy contract was legally binding. In most cases, the surrogate had no legal claim to the baby. The baby belonged to the intended parents, and if the surrogate tried to keep the baby, she could face serious legal consequences. I felt like I was trapped. I had signed a contract that essentially said the baby wasn't mine, that I had no claim to her, that I was just a vessel for someone else's child. And now that she was here, now that I had held her and loved her and felt the connection between us, I couldn't imagine living without her. On the second day in the hospital, a social worker came by to check on me. She asked how I was feeling, how my physical recovery was going, whether I had any concerns, and I almost told her. I almost said, I can't give my baby to Jessica. I can't do this. I've changed my mind. But I didn't say anything. I just smiled and said I was fine, that I was happy for Jessica and Daniel, that I was recovering well. Why didn't I say anything? There were several reasons. First, I was terrified. I knew that if I tried to keep the baby, Jessica would fight me legally, and the law was on her side. Second, I didn't want to hurt Jessica. She had been so kind to me. She had supported me through my pregnancy. She had been there for my labor. She had become a mother to Lily, and I couldn't imagine causing her that kind of pain. And third, if I'm being completely honest, I didn't want anyone to think I was a bad person. I had offered to be a surrogate. I had signed the contract. I had promised that I would give the baby to Jessica and Daniel. Breaking that promise would make me look like a villain. It would make me look like someone who had deceived my best friend. So I kept quiet. On the third day, we were discharged from the hospital. Jessica had a car seat ready. They had her dressed in a special outfit that Jessica had bought for bringing her home. They had a nursery ready at their house, decorated in soft pastels and filled with toys and clothes. I was discharged in a wheelchair, as hospital protocol required. Jessica was carrying Lily in her arms. Daniel was pushing my wheelchair. We walked to the parking lot together, and that's when it happened. That's when I finally said something. Jessica, I said, can we talk in the car for a minute? Before you take her home? Of course, Jessica said. She was confused by my tone, I could tell. But she agreed. Daniel put the car seat in the car and opened the back door for me. I sat in the back seat, and Jessica sat next to me, still holding Lily. I don't think I can do this, I said quietly. Jessica looked at me, and her face went blank. What do you mean? What can't you do? I can't give you the baby, I said. I can't do it. I love her. I carried her for 9 months. I gave birth to her. I can't just hand her over and pretend she's not mine. The silence in the car was absolute. Jessica stared at me, her mouth opened slightly, her expression somewhere between shock and horror. Sarah, she said finally, her voice very quiet. We have a contract. You signed a contract. I know, I said. I know that. But I was wrong. I didn't understand what it would feel like. I thought I could be objective about this, but I can't. This is my daughter, and I want to keep her. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. But they weren't tears of understanding or empathy. They were tears of anger and betrayal and rage. "You can't do this," she said. Her voice was shaking. "You can't do this to me, Sarah. I've been waiting for this baby my entire life. Daniel and I have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars. I've already told everyone about her. I've already introduced her as my daughter." "I'm so sorry," I said. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know—" "No," Jessica said. She turned away from me, shielding Lily in her arms as if I might try to grab her. "No, you don't get to be sorry. You don't get to change your mind. This is my baby. You promised. You promised." "Jessica, get out of the car," she said. "What?" "Get out of the car, Sarah. I can't look at you right now." I got out of the car. Daniel was standing outside, confused about what was happening. Jessica got out of the car on the other side, still holding Lily, and she pointed at me with her free hand. "I am going to take you to court," she said. "I am going to make you regret this day for the rest of your life. Lily is my daughter. You signed away your rights, and you're not going to ruin my life." She got back in the car. Daniel quickly got in the driver's seat, and they drove away, leaving me standing in the hospital parking lot, my legs weak from the epidural, my body still bleeding from childbirth, completely alone. I stood there for a long time, staring at the space where their car had been, and then I sat down on the curb and I cried. I cried like I had never cried before. I cried for the baby I had just lost. I cried for the friendship I had just destroyed. I cried for the life I had thought I was going to have, and the life I had just thrown away. A nurse came out of the hospital and found me sitting on the curb, sobbing. She helped me back into a wheelchair and back into the hospital. I spent another night in the hospital because I was having a panic attack, and my blood pressure was still elevated. It was the worst night of my life. After they cleaned the baby up, Jessica held her. She held my biological daughter, my baby, and she cried tears of joy. Daniel was taking pictures and video. The nurses were congratulating us. It was supposed to be the most beautiful moment of Jessica's life, the moment she became a mother. And I was lying in that hospital bed, watching another woman hold my baby, and I was dying inside. The hospital stay was 3 days. Jessica and Daniel stayed in the hospital room with me and the baby. They slept in the uncomfortable chairs. They brought me food. They helped me learn to breastfeed. They were the picture of grateful intended parents, and I was the picture of a kind surrogate who had just given them the greatest gift of their life. But internally, I was falling apart. On the first night in the hospital, I woke up at 2 a.m., unable to sleep. The baby was asleep in the bassinet next to my bed. Jessica and Daniel were asleep in the chairs, and I sat there, staring at my daughter, thinking about how I could possibly survive giving her up. I pulled up my phone and did something I shouldn't have done. I started Googling surrogate mother changing mind, and surrogate keeps baby, and can a surrogate take custody? The results were depressing. The surrogacy contract was legally binding. In most cases, the surrogate had no legal claim to the baby. The baby belonged to the intended parents, and if the surrogate tried to keep the baby, she could face serious legal consequences. I felt like I was trapped. I had signed a contract that essentially said the baby wasn't mine, that I had no claim to her, that I was just a vessel for someone else's child. And now that she was here, now that I had held her and loved her and felt the connection between us, I couldn't imagine living without her. On the second day in the hospital, a social worker came by to check on me. She asked how I was feeling, how my physical recovery was going, whether I had any concerns, and I almost told her. I almost said, "I can't give my baby to Jessica. I can't do this. I've changed my mind." But I didn't say anything. I just smiled and said I was fine, that I was happy for Jessica and Daniel, that I was recovering well. Why didn't I say anything? There were several reasons. First, I was terrified. I knew that if I tried to keep the baby, Jessica would fight me legally, and the law was on her side. Second, I didn't want to hurt Jessica. She had been so kind to me. She had supported me through my pregnancy. She had been there for my labor. She had become a mother to Lily, and I couldn't imagine causing her that kind of pain. And third, if I'm being completely honest, I didn't want anyone to think I was a bad person. I had offered to be a surrogate. I had signed the contract. I had promised that I would give the baby to Jessica and Daniel. Breaking that promise would make me look like a villain. It would make me look like someone who had deceived my best friend. So I kept quiet. On the third day, we were discharged from the hospital. Jessica had a car seat ready. They had her dressed in a special outfit that Jessica had bought for bringing her home. They had a nursery ready at their house, decorated in soft pastels and filled with toys and clothes. I was discharged in a wheelchair, as hospital protocol required. Jessica was carrying Lily in her arms. Daniel was pushing my wheelchair. We walked to the parking lot together, and that's when it happened. That's when I finally said something. "Jessica?" I said. "Can we talk in the car for a minute? Before you take her home?" "Of course," Jessica said. She was confused by my tone, I could tell. But she agreed. Daniel put the car seat in the car and opened the back door for me. I sat in the back seat, and Jessica sat next to me, still holding Lily. "I don't think I can do this," I said quietly. Jessica looked at me, and her face went blank. "What do you mean? What can't you do?" "I can't give you the baby," I said. "I can't do it. I love her. I carried her for 9 months. I gave birth to her. I can't just hand her over and pretend she's not mine." The silence in the car was absolute. Jessica stared at me, her mouth open slightly, her expression somewhere between shock and horror. "Sarah," she said finally, her voice very quiet. "We have a contract. You signed a contract." "I know," I said. "I know that. But I was wrong. I didn't understand what it would feel like. I thought I could be objective about this, but I can't. This is my daughter, and I want to keep her." Jessica's eyes filled with tears. But they weren't tears of understanding or empathy. They were tears of anger and betrayal and rage. "You can't do this," she said. Her voice was shaking. "You can't do this to me, Sarah. I've been waiting for this baby my entire life. Daniel and I have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars. I've already told everyone about her. I've already introduced her as my daughter." "I'm so sorry," I said. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know—" "No," Jessica said. She turned away from me, shielding Lily in her arms as if I might try to grab her. "No, you don't get to be sorry. You don't get to change your mind. This is my baby. You promised. You promised." "Jessica, get out of the car," she said. "What?" "Get out of the car, Sarah. I can't look at you right now." I got out of the car. Daniel was standing outside, confused about what was happening. Jessica got out of the car on the other side, still holding Lily, and she pointed at me with her free hand. "I am going to take you to court," she said. "I am going to make you regret this day for the rest of your life. Lily is my daughter. You signed away your rights, and you're not going to ruin my life." She got back in the car. Daniel quickly got in the driver's seat, and they drove away, leaving me standing in the hospital parking lot, my legs weak from the epidural, my body still bleeding from childbirth, completely alone. I stood there for a long time, staring at the space where their car had been. And then I sat down on the curb and I cried. I cried like I had never cried before. I cried for the baby I had just lost. I cried for the friendship I had just destroyed. I cried for the life I had thought I was going to have, and the life I had just thrown away. A nurse came out of the hospital and found me sitting on the curb, sobbing. She helped me back into a wheelchair and back into the hospital. I spent another night in the hospital because I was having a panic attack and my blood pressure was still elevated. It was the worst night of my life. If you're still watching this story on Tinty Tales, I want to stop here for a moment and thank you. This story is getting harder to tell. This story is about the worst moment of my life, and I'm grateful that you're here listening to it. If this story is resonating with you, if you're feeling connected to what I'm experiencing, please support us right now. Please hit the like button. Please subscribe to Tinty Tales if you haven't already. And if you want to directly support our channel, please send a super thanks. Your support helps us continue to tell these important stories. Your support helps us reach people who need to hear these stories. And please, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I want to know if you're watching from America, from Canada, from Europe, from Asia. I want to know how far this story is traveling. Tell me your thoughts on what happened. Tell me if you think I was wrong to try to keep Lily. Tell me what you would have done in my situation. But most importantly, if you're in a situation where something feels wrong, where you're being treated unfairly, where you're fighting a battle that seems impossible, please reach out for help. Call a lawyer. Call a therapist. Tell someone who can actually help you. Don't suffer in silence like I did. Now, let's continue with this story. It gets much darker before it gets better. The next morning, I received a call from Jessica's lawyer. His name was Robert Sterling, and he was very clear about what was about to happen to me. "Ms. Mitchell," he said, his voice cold and professional, "my client, Jessica Chen, has asked me to represent her in a surrogacy dispute with you. You have signed a legal contract that gives my client full parental rights to the child born from this surrogacy arrangement. You have no legal claim to this child. If you persist in this attempt to retain custody, you will face serious legal consequences, including but not limited to civil litigation for breach of contract, damages, attorney fees, and potentially criminal charges." I was sitting in my hospital bed, still recovering from giving birth, still bleeding, still in terrible pain, and this man was threatening me. "I want to speak with a lawyer," I said. "That would be wise," Mr. Sterling said. "I suggest you retain counsel immediately. You have 2 weeks to respond to the legal notice we will be sending you." He hung up. I sat there in my hospital bed, shaking, and I called my father. My father is a retired lawyer. He's been retired for 15 years, but he knows the law, and most importantly, he knows me. "Dad," I said, "I need your help." I told him the whole story. I told him about the surrogacy. I told him about changing my mind. I told him about Jessica's threat to take me to court. And I told him that I didn't know what to do. My father listened to the entire story without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. "Sarah," he said finally, "I have to be honest with you. The law is likely on Jessica's side. You signed a contract. You agreed to be a surrogate. You agreed to give the child to Jessica and Daniel. The court is probably not going to let you keep the baby." "But it's my baby," I said. "I gave birth to her. Doesn't that mean something?" "Normally, yes," my father said. "A woman who gives birth to a child has parental rights. But surrogacy contracts specifically exist to override that natural right. You specifically gave up your parental rights when you signed the contract. The court is going to enforce that contract." I felt like I couldn't breathe, "So I'm going to lose her." "I don't know," my father said. "But I think you need to talk to a lawyer who specializes in family law and surrogacy. I don't practice family law anymore, and I'm not going to give you false hope. You need to talk to someone who knows this area of law inside and out." He gave me a referral to a lawyer named Catherine Martinez. Catherine specialized in family law and had handled several surrogacy cases. I called her office from my hospital bed, and they got me an appointment for the following week. The first consultation with Catherine was sobering. "You're in a difficult position," she said after I'd explained my situation. "You signed a very comprehensive surrogacy contract. It explicitly states that you are waiving your parental rights and that Jessica and Daniel are the legal parents of any child born from this arrangement. You also signed away your custody and visitation rights. There is no legally recognized relationship between you and this child." "But I'm her biological mother," I said. "That means something, right?" "In normal circumstances, yes," Catherine said. "But you signed away your parental rights specifically because the law recognizes that you would otherwise have those rights. By signing this contract, you told the court that you understand this child is not yours, and you do not want parental rights to this child." "I was wrong," I said. "I changed my mind. I understand," Catherine said. "But changing your mind doesn't undo the contract you signed. The law doesn't usually allow people to void contracts just because they've changed their minds." She laid out my options. Option 1 was to negotiate with Jessica and Daniel to reach some kind of compromise. Maybe I could get visitation rights, or custody during certain times of the year. Maybe I could work out something that allowed me to remain in Lily's life. Option 2 was to fight the contract in court, but Catherine warned me that this would be very expensive, very difficult, and very unlikely to result in me getting custody. The court might grant me some limited visitation rights, but it was unlikely to overturn the surrogacy contract. "How expensive?" I asked. "Family law litigation can cost anywhere from $10,000 to $50,000, Catherine said. "If your case goes to trial, it could be more. And you should know that Jessica likely has more money than you do. She can afford to hire the best lawyers. You'll be going up against a very well-funded opponent." I felt like the room was spinning. This wasn't fair. This wasn't right. I carried the baby. I gave birth to her, and somehow the law said she wasn't mine. "Let me think about it," I told Catherine. "Let me see if I can work out something with Jessica." But I already knew that wasn't going to happen. 2 weeks after I left the hospital, I received the legal notice from Jessica's lawyer. The language was stark and cold. Jessica and Daniel were filing for a declaratory judgment confirming that they were the legal parents of Lily and that I had no parental rights. They were also filing a request for attorney's fees, asking that I pay for their legal costs. And they were filing a request for child support, because apparently the law said that as Lily's biological mother, I might have a financial obligation to support the child I had no legal right to see. The irony was not lost on me. I called Jessica. She didn't answer. I texted her. She didn't respond. I called Daniel. He also didn't answer. I had lost my best friend, and the only way I could communicate with her now was through lawyers. I hired Catherine Martinez. I told her to fight. I told her that I didn't care how expensive it was or how difficult it would be. I was not going to let Jessica keep my baby without a fight. The discovery process was brutal. Jessica's lawyer requested all of my medical records, all of my mental health records, my employment records, my financial records. They wanted to know everything about me. They wanted to find ammunition to use against me. My therapist, Dr. Chen, was called for a deposition. I was horrified when I read the transcript of his testimony. He testified that I had expressed concerns about my emotional attachment to the baby during our sessions. He testified that I hadn't seemed fully committed to giving up the baby. He testified that in his professional opinion, I was not fully prepared for the emotional toll of surrogacy. Jessica's lawyer used all of this against me. He argued that I had never been psychologically prepared for surrogacy. He argued that I had hidden my true intentions from the beginning. He argued that I was now attempting to use the psychological struggles I'd had during pregnancy as an excuse to breach the contract. I felt betrayed by Dr. Chen, but intellectually, I understood he was just being honest about what I'd told him. I had told him that I was struggling. He had documented that struggle. And now Jessica's lawyer was using it as evidence that I was unstable. The legal process took months. The months turned into a year. During that entire year, I was not allowed to see Lily. The surrogacy contract had given Jessica and Daniel full custody, and Jessica was not allowing me to have any contact with my biological daughter, but I had to pay child support. The irony of it all was that I had to send Jessica $1,500 a month to help raise the child I could not see. I had to contribute financially to the raising of my daughter, but I had no rights as her mother. I had no say in how she was raised. I had no visitation rights. I had no claim to her. I felt like I was in a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. My work suffered. I couldn't focus on patients. I would be administering anesthesia, and I would be thinking about Lily. I would be in the middle of a surgery, and I would wonder what Lily was doing, what she looked like now, what her first smile looked like, what her first word was. I couldn't eat. I lost 30 pounds. I wasn't sleeping. I was having panic attacks. I was barely functioning. My father was worried about me. My colleagues were worried about me. My few remaining friends were worried about me. I was a disaster. Catherine kept telling me to prepare for the reality that I was probably going to lose this case. She kept telling me that the best I could hope for was some limited visitation rights, but I refused to accept that. I refused to believe that. One afternoon, I received a call from Jessica's neighbor, a woman named Margaret, who I had met once or twice over the years. "Sarah," she said when I answered. "This is Margaret. I live next to Jessica and Daniel. I'm calling because I think you should know something, and I feel like I have a responsibility to tell you, even though Jessica would probably hate me for it." "What is it?" I asked, my heart already racing. "I've been hearing Jessica and Daniel fighting," Margaret said. "Really bad fights. And I've heard Jessica saying things about Lily that, well, I think you should know about. I'm not supposed to be telling you this. Jessica would probably get a restraining order against me if she knew. But I think what's happening over here isn't right, and you deserve to know." "What have you heard?" I asked. Margaret took a deep breath. "I've heard Jessica telling Daniel that she doesn't think she can handle being a mother. I've heard her saying that Lily cries too much and that she doesn't know how to comfort her. I've heard her saying that she regrets doing the surrogacy, that it was a mistake, that she wishes she'd adopted instead." I felt my chest tighten. "Margaret, are you sure about this?" "I'm sure," Margaret said. "And there's more. I've seen things that worry me. I've seen Jessica putting Lily in her crib for hours while she goes out. I've seen Lily left outside in her stroller in the middle of the day without being checked on. I don't want to sound alarmist, but I'm concerned about that child's welfare." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because I think you care about Lily," Margaret said. "I think you love her, and I think she deserves to be with someone who wants her. Jessica seems, I don't know how to describe it. She seems resentful, like Lily is a burden instead of a blessing." I hung up after promising Margaret that I would keep her identity confidential. My hands were shaking. My mind was racing. What Margaret had told me was consistent with something I'd been wondering about for months. Jessica had stopped posting pictures of Lily on social media. Jessica had stopped talking about Lily in the way she'd talked about her before Lily was born. I called Catherine immediately. I told her what Margaret had said. Catherine was very careful to warn me that neighbor reports were hearsay and probably wouldn't be admissible in court, but she said we might be able to use this information to investigate whether there were concerns about Lily's welfare. If there are legitimate concerns about how Lily is being cared for, Catherine said, we might be able to petition the court to order an investigation by Child Protective Services. If CPS finds that Lily is being neglected, that could be grounds for you to be granted custody. I felt sick even thinking about it. I didn't want Lily to be neglected. I didn't want Lily to be in danger or unhappy. I just wanted my daughter to be safe and loved, whether or not she was with me. But yes, if there was a way for me to actually have a chance at getting custody, I wanted to pursue it. Catherine hired a private investigator to look into the situation at Jessica's house. Over the next 2 weeks, the investigator observed Jessica's behavior and Lily's condition. The investigator noted times when Lily was left alone for extended periods. The investigator documented that Lily appeared to be underweight and that she was frequently crying. On the basis of the investigator's report, Catherine filed a petition with the court asking for an investigation by Child Protective Services. What happened next was shocking to everyone involved. CPS did come to Jessica's house. They interviewed Jessica and Daniel. They examined Lily, and they found significant concerns. Lily was not being properly fed. Lily was being left alone for extended periods, which was a safety hazard for a young child. Lily appeared to be suffering from neglect. Jessica and Daniel were ordered to participate in parenting classes. They were ordered to allow CPS to conduct home visits. And most importantly, the court ordered that the case against me be put on hold while the welfare concerns were addressed. I was shocked. I had been preparing to lose my case, and suddenly, the tables had turned. But then Jessica made a move that I never could have anticipated. She called me. For the first time since the day I was discharged from the hospital, Jessica called me. "Sarah," she said when I answered, "I need to talk to you. Can you meet me somewhere?" I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop near my apartment. When I saw her, I barely recognized her. She looked exhausted. She had dark circles under her eyes. She looked like someone who hadn't been sleeping. "I need you to know something," Jessica said, before even saying hello. "I need you to know that I love Lily. I love her so much. But I think I made a terrible mistake. I think I thought I wanted to be a mother, but I'm not ready. I'm not equipped for it, and Lily is suffering because of it." I listened, not sure what she was saying or where this was going. "Sarah," Jessica continued, "I think Lily would be better off with you. I think you're her real mother. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything I've put you through. I'm sorry for fighting you. I'm sorry for keeping you from her. I was scared and I was angry and I acted badly, but I see now that I was wrong." I sat there in the coffee shop staring at my former best friend, trying to understand what was happening. "What are you saying?" I asked carefully. "I'm saying," Jessica said, "that I want to work out an arrangement where you get custody of Lily. I don't want to fight you anymore. I want Lily to be with her real mother." I felt like I was in a dream. This was what I'd been fighting for. This was what I wanted. But hearing Jessica say it, I realized I had mixed feelings. I was angry with her. I was hurt. I was betrayed. But I was also relieved. Finally, I might be able to have my daughter back. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Why didn't you tell me this before CPS got involved? Why did you make me fight you for so long?" "Because I was stupid," Jessica said, and she started crying. "Because I was proud. Because I thought if I admitted I'd made a mistake, it would mean I was a bad person. But I am a bad person, Sarah. I fought you to keep a baby I didn't even want. I kept you from your daughter, and I neglected that baby because I couldn't handle being a mother." The tears were streaming down her face now. She looked like she wanted to say more, but she couldn't get the words out. "I don't know what to say," I said. "You don't have to say anything," Jessica said. "Just, please take Lily. Please be the mother she deserves to be, and please forgive me. I don't expect you to forgive me right now. I might never deserve your forgiveness, but I'm asking for it anyway." I left that coffee shop in a daze. I called Catherine and told her what Jessica had said. Catherine said that if Jessica was willing to voluntarily sign away her parental rights and give me custody, that would make everything much simpler. We wouldn't have to go to trial. We could work out an arrangement with Jessica's lawyer. 2 weeks later, Jessica and Daniel signed the paperwork giving me full custody of Lily. The first time I held Lily after regaining custody, I cried. She was 1 year old now. She had grown so much since I'd last seen her. She didn't recognize me. She didn't know that I was her biological mother. She didn't know that I'd been fighting for her for the entire year of her life. She just knew that I was a stranger picking her up. But I held her anyway. And I cried. And I promised her that I would spend the rest of my life making up for the year that I'd missed. I promised her that I would love her fiercely and completely. I promised her that I would never let her be taken from me again. Becoming Lily's mother was the most challenging thing I'd ever done. She'd been neglected by Jessica and Daniel, and that neglect had left her with emotional and physical effects that I had to help her heal from. She had trouble eating. She had anxiety. She would cry for no apparent reason, and I realized those were probably panic attacks. She had been failed by the people who were supposed to protect her, and now she had to learn to trust me. The first months were exhausting. I was working part-time as an anesthesiologist while also caring for Lily full-time. I was in therapy dealing with the trauma of what had happened. I was still paying child support to Jessica and Daniel. The court said I had to continue paying until Lily was 18, even though I now had custody, and I was dealing with the complicated feelings of anger and betrayal toward the woman I'd once called my best friend. But slowly, Lily began to heal. She began to smile more. She began to laugh. She began to recognize me as her mother. And she began to bond with me. By the time she was 2 years old, she was calling me Mama. And there was nothing in the world that sounded sweeter to my ears. I had to rebuild my life from scratch. I couldn't be friends with Jessica anymore. That friendship had been damaged beyond repair. Losing Jessica was almost as painful as losing Lily had been, because Jessica had been a part of my life since college. Jessica had been my sister, my confidant, my family, and now she was gone. I went back to therapy. I started seeing a trauma therapist who specialized in grief and loss. I worked through the anger and the betrayal and the complicated mix of emotions I felt toward Jessica. I eventually got to a place where I could understand that Jessica had made a mistake, that she had acted out of fear and pride, and that she deserved some grace, even if we could never be friends again. I also worked through my complicated feelings about the surrogacy. I had wanted to help my best friend become a mother. I had wanted to do something noble and selfless, but the experience had taught me that some gifts are too costly, and some sacrifices come with consequences we can't anticipate. Lily grew into the most beautiful, intelligent, loving little girl. She started kindergarten when she was 5 years old. She made friends easily. She was curious about the world. She was resilient in the way that children who've overcome early trauma can be. And I was her mother. Finally, I was her mother in all the ways that mattered. Legally, emotionally, biologically. She was my daughter, and I was her mom. But the experience had changed me. I was more cautious in my relationships. I was less trusting. I had learned that people I loved could hurt me in ways I'd never imagined. I had learned that the world wasn't always fair or just. I had learned that sometimes you do the right thing, and everything still goes wrong. 3 years after I got custody of Lily, I was contacted by Jessica. She wanted to meet. She said she had something she needed to tell me. I almost didn't meet her. I had moved on. I had healed. I didn't want to dredge up all those painful memories, but something made me agree. We met at the same coffee shop where we'd met before, when Jessica had offered to give me custody of Lily. "Sarah," Jessica said, "I owe you an apology. Several apologies, actually. Jessica, I said, I've processed what happened. I've moved on. I don't need another apology. I know you don't need one, Jessica said, but I need to give you one. I need you to understand that what I did to you was wrong. It was cruel. It was manipulative. And I've been in therapy trying to understand why I did it. Why did you do it? I asked. Because I was terrified, Jessica said. I had wanted to be a mother my entire life. And when I finally had the opportunity, I realized that I was terrified of failing, terrified of not being good enough, terrified of not being able to love the baby enough. And instead of dealing with those fears, I blamed you. I told myself that you were being selfish for trying to keep Lily. I told myself that you'd made a promise and you were breaking it. But the truth is, I was the selfish one. I was so focused on my own feelings that I completely ignored your feelings, Lily's feelings, even Daniel's feelings. Where is Daniel? I asked. I hadn't heard anything about him in years. We're divorced, Jessica said. We separated about a year ago. He couldn't forgive me for how I treated you and Lily. He said he didn't know who I was anymore. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. Don't be, Jessica said. I deserve it. What I did was unforgivable, but I wanted to see you today to tell you that I'm sorry, and to tell you that I think you're an amazing mother. Lily is lucky to have you. Lily is lucky to have anyone who loves her, I said. After what you put her through, she's just lucky to be safe. I know, Jessica said quietly. And I've started a fund for children's services. I've been donating money to help children who've experienced neglect. It's not redemption, because what I did can't be redeemed. But it's something. It's my way of trying to contribute something positive after contributing something so negative. After Jessica left, I sat in that coffee shop for a long time, thinking about everything that had happened. I thought about the surrogacy arrangement that had gone so wrong. I thought about the friendship that had been destroyed. I thought about the legal battle that had nearly bankrupted me. I thought about Lily and how she had survived being neglected by Jessica. And I realized something important. The story wasn't over. My story with Lily was just beginning. As Lily got older, I had to make a decision about how much to tell her about her origins. When she was 6, she started asking questions about where she came from. She understood that I had given birth to her, but she was starting to understand that she hadn't lived with me when she was a baby. Why didn't I live with you when I was little? She asked me one day while we were making cookies together. I took a deep breath. I had been preparing for this conversation for years, and now it was time to have it. Because, I said carefully, there was another lady who wanted to be your mommy, and I helped her have you. But then she realized she wasn't ready to be a mommy yet, so you came to live with me. Is she still alive? Lily asked. Yes, I said. She's still alive. Can I meet her? Lily asked. I hesitated. This was a question I'd hoped Lily wouldn't ask, but I'd known she probably would eventually. Do you want to meet her? I asked. I don't know, Lily said. I want to know why I didn't live with you when I was little. I want to know why the lady didn't want me anymore. She wanted you, I said, but she wasn't ready to be a mommy. That wasn't your fault. That had nothing to do with you. That had to do with her. And when she realized that she wasn't ready, we made the decision that you should live with me instead. Are you her friend? Lily asked. I thought about how to answer that question. Was I Jessica's friend? We weren't friends anymore, but we had had a profound friendship that had been destroyed. Could we rebuild that friendship? I didn't know. And was it appropriate for me to rebuild a friendship with the woman who had neglected my daughter? We used to be friends, I said finally, but we're not friends anymore. Sometimes friendships end and that's okay. Because of me? Lily asked, her voice small. No, I said immediately, pulling her into my lap. Never because of you. Not because of anything you did. It's complicated, and you're too young to understand all of it right now. But I want you to know that it was never your fault. You were just a baby. You didn't do anything wrong. We left that conversation there. Lily was satisfied with my answer for now, but I knew that when she was older, she would want more details. When she was a teenager, she would probably want to meet Jessica. And I would have to decide whether to facilitate that meeting or to protect her from it. By the time Lily was 10 years old, I had mostly healed from the trauma of the surrogacy experience. I had processed my anger toward Jessica, I had processed my grief over the lost friendship. I had processed my fear about whether Lily would be taken from me again, and I had started dating again. His name was Michael. He was a pediatrician who worked at the same hospital where I worked. We met in the doctor's lounge and started talking about a patient. He made me laugh and he made me think. More importantly, he was kind to Lily. He didn't try to be her father. He didn't try to replace me in her life. He just treated her with respect and warmth. Lily liked Michael. She actually seemed excited when he was coming to visit. After I'd been dating Michael for about a year, he asked me to marry him, and I said yes. I never thought I would get married. I had given up on that dream after my experience with the surrogacy. But Michael showed me that there were still good people in the world, that not everyone would betray me, that it was possible to have a healthy, loving relationship. Lily was the flower girl at my wedding. She looked beautiful in her dress. And when she saw me in my wedding gown, she told me I looked like a princess. "You look beautiful, Mommy," she said. And those words meant more to me than anything else on my wedding day. With Michael in our lives, things became easier. Michael supported me emotionally. He supported Lily emotionally. He helped me be a better mother because I wasn't trying to do everything alone anymore. 2 years after I married Michael, I found out I was pregnant. When I took that pregnancy test, I felt something that I hadn't felt since I discovered I was pregnant with Lily as a surrogate. I felt fear. I felt excitement. I felt uncertainty about whether I could be a good mother to another child. But I also felt something else. I felt like I was ready. I felt like I had learned from my experience with Lily. I felt like I had healed enough to bring another child into my life without bringing trauma into their life. I gave birth to my son, Benjamin, when Lily was 12. Lily was at the hospital when Benjamin was born, and she cut his umbilical cord. She held him and she cried and she said, "I'm a big sister. I'm his big sister." And I realized in that moment that my life had come full circle. I had given birth as a surrogate, and that experience had nearly destroyed me. But I had survived. I had healed. And I had gone on to have my own biological children, children who were mine in every way that mattered. When Lily was 15 years old, she asked me if she could meet Jessica. "I want to know her," Lily said. "I want to know who she is. I want to know why she did what she did." I had been waiting for this day. I had been dreading it and hoping for it at the same time. "Are you sure?" I asked. "It might be complicated. It might bring up difficult feelings." "I know," Lily said, "but I want to know her, and I want to tell her that she hurt me." So I contacted Jessica. I told her that Lily wanted to meet her. Jessica was nervous about it. She had no right to be nervous. After all, she had been the one who had hurt Lily. But she was. And I understood why. We met at a coffee shop on a Saturday afternoon. Lily was nervous. I was nervous. And when Jessica arrived and saw Lily for the first time in 14 years, she cried. "Hi," Jessica said to Lily. "I'm Jessica. I'm someone from your mom's past, someone who made some mistakes that affected your life." "You didn't want me," Lily said, very matter-of-factly. She had practiced this conversation with me many times. "That's not true," Jessica said. And she looked at me with an expression that was so vulnerable, so full of regret, that I almost felt sorry for her. "I wanted you, but I wasn't ready to be your mother, and that was my failure, not yours. You didn't do anything wrong. I failed you." "My mom says you neglected me," Lily said. "My mom says that when I was with you, I wasn't being fed properly and I was being left alone." "That's true," Jessica said quietly. "I did those things, and I'm ashamed of myself for doing them. I have spent years trying to understand why I did those things, and the only answer I have is that I was scared. I was so scared of failing that I actually did fail, and you suffered because of my fear." "I have nightmares," Lily said. "I have nightmares about being alone. My therapist says it's because of what happened to me when I was a baby." Jessica's face crumpled. She looked like she wanted to die. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I'm so sorry. There's nothing I can say that will make it right. There's nothing I can do to undo what I did to you. All I can tell you is that I regret it every single day. I regret it more than I regret anything else in my life." Lily and Jessica talked for a long time that day. They didn't become friends, but they reached some kind of understanding. Jessica answered Lily's questions about why she had wanted to be a mother, about what had made her realize she wasn't ready, about how she had learned to forgive herself. Lily asked about Daniel, and Jessica explained that he had remarried and had 2 children of his own. Lily asked if she had any half-siblings, and Jessica said yes, she did, but she didn't know if they would ever meet. After that first meeting, Lily and Jessica started meeting occasionally. It wasn't a close relationship, but it was something. It was Lily having access to the woman who had given birth to her, who had loved her in her own confused way, who had ultimately chosen to give her to me because she knew that was the right thing to do. And I realized something important during this process. I realized that I had forgiven Jessica. Not completely, not unconditionally, but I had forgiven her. I had forgiven her for taking Lily away from me. I had forgiven her for fighting me in court. I had forgiven her for the pain she had caused me and Lily. Why had I forgiven her? Because I realized that Jessica was human. She had made a terrible mistake, but she had owned that mistake. She had done the work to understand why she'd made it. She had spent years trying to atone for it. She had allowed her daughter, not her daughter, but the daughter she'd been supposed to raise, to know her, to question her, to potentially forgive her, and that was worth something. Now I'm 47 years old. Lily is 18. Benjamin is 6. I have been married to Michael for 8 years, and we are happy. I am an anesthesiologist, but I've cut back my hours so I can spend more time with my family. I volunteer at a fertility clinic counseling prospective surrogates about the emotional complexities of surrogacy. If you're watching this story and you're thinking about becoming a surrogate, I want to tell you something important. I want to tell you that surrogacy can be a beautiful thing. It can be a gift that changes someone's life forever, but it's also complicated. It involves giving birth to a child and then giving that child to someone else. And that experience will change you forever. You need to go into it with full knowledge of what you're committing to. You need to work with a therapist who specializes in surrogacy. You need to have realistic expectations about your emotional response. You need to understand that changing your mind is possible. And you need to understand the legal and emotional consequences of changing your mind. If you're watching this story and you're considering surrogacy for your best friend or family member, I want to tell you something else. The relationship you have before surrogacy is not the same relationship you'll have after surrogacy. Something fundamental changes, the dynamic shifts, and there's a real risk that the relationship will be damaged beyond repair. Is that always true? No. There are many successful surrogacy arrangements where the relationship between the surrogate and the intended parent survives and even thrives. But there's also a real risk that it won't, and you need to be prepared for that possibility. And if you're in a surrogacy situation that's gone wrong, I want to tell you that there is hope. There are lawyers who specialize in these situations. There are therapists who understand the trauma of surrogacy. There are support groups for people who've been through similar experiences. You are not alone, and your pain is valid. I also want to talk about what I wish I had done differently. I wish I had paid more attention to Dr. Chen's concerns about my emotional state. I wish I had done more therapeutic work before becoming a surrogate. I wish I had had more honest conversations with Jessica about what the experience would be like for me emotionally. I wish I had trusted my instincts more. When I was pregnant and I started feeling attached to Lily, I tried to push those feelings down instead of processing them. If I had processed them, maybe I would have realized before I gave birth that I couldn't go through with giving her up. I wish I had had legal representation before I signed the surrogacy contract. I wish I had asked more questions about what would happen if I changed my mind. I wish I had understood the legal implications of signing away my parental rights. But I can't change the past. I can only learn from it and move forward. Jessica and I have never been best friends again. We have reached a place of civility and even occasional warmth, but we will never have the relationship we had before. That relationship was destroyed by what happened, and you can't rebuild something that's been broken that completely. I don't regret being a surrogate. I regret how the situation played out, and I regret the pain that it caused everyone involved. But if I hadn't been a surrogate, Lily wouldn't exist, and Lily is one of the greatest joys of my life. So do I regret my choice to become a surrogate? I don't know. It's complicated. It was the worst decision I ever made in some ways, and it was the best decision I ever made in other ways. What I do know is that it changed me. It taught me about sacrifice and love and betrayal and healing. It taught me that sometimes The people we trust most can hurt us in ways we never imagined. It taught me that we are stronger than we think. It taught me that life is rarely fair, but it can still be beautiful. Lily has talked about becoming a therapist who specializes in adoption and surrogacy trauma. She has talked about using her experience to help other children who've been through similar situations. She has turned her pain into purpose, and I'm so proud of her for that. Michael and I have talked about having another biological child, but we haven't made a final decision yet. I feel ready in a way that I didn't before. I feel like I could have another child without bringing unresolved trauma into their life, but I'm also content with my family as it is. Benjamin is the light of my life. He's intelligent and sensitive and funny. He adores his big sister, and I'm able to be the mother to him that I wish I'd been allowed to be to Lily during her first year of life. I've written about my experience with surrogacy. I've been interviewed by journalists. I've spoken at conferences about the importance of better psychological support for surrogates. I've tried to take my painful experience and use it to help other people avoid similar pain. Has it worked? I don't know. But it's given me a sense of purpose. It's given me a way to transform my suffering into something meaningful. If you've made it this far in my story, I want to thank you personally. This has been a long story, and I know it's been an emotionally intense one. If you're still with me, thank you. If this story has resonated with you, if you felt connected to what I've experienced, I want to ask you to do something for me right now. First, if you haven't already, please like this video. The like button helps Tinty Tales' algorithm, which means our stories reach more people. Your like matters. Second, if you're not already subscribed to Tinty Tales, please subscribe right now. We tell stories about betrayal, about survival, about transformation. We tell stories about real people facing impossible circumstances and finding their way through to the other side. We tell stories that matter, and we post new stories every week. Third, if you want to directly support Tinty Tales, please send a super thanks. Your financial support allows us to continue bringing these important stories to life. It allows us to compensate the people who tell these stories. It allows us to continue this work. And fourth, please tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Tell me what you think about my story. Tell me whether you think I was right to try to keep Lily. Tell me whether you think I was right to forgive Jessica. Tell me what you would have done in my situation. Let's have a community conversation about this story. If you're in a surrogacy situation that's gone wrong, please reach out for help. Call a lawyer. Call a therapist. Contact a support organization. There are resources available to you. You're not alone. If you're thinking about becoming a surrogate, please do your research. Talk to other surrogates. Work with a qualified psychologist. Make sure you understand what you're committing to. Make sure you're prepared for the emotional toll. And if you have a friend or family member who's considering surrogacy, please have honest conversations with them about the emotional implications. Please support them, but also please be realistic with them. Please help them understand that relationships can be damaged by surrogacy, and that's a risk they need to be prepared for. Most importantly, I want you to know that whatever you're facing, whatever pain you're experiencing, there is hope. There is healing. There is a way forward even when it feels impossible. My life is beautiful now. I have a loving family. I have work that's meaningful. I have children who are healthy and happy. I've transformed my pain into purpose. And so can you. This is Sarah Mitchell. I'm now 47 years old. I've been through a surrogacy nightmare, a custody battle, and years of healing, and I'm still here. I'm stronger than I was before. I'm wiser than I was before. I'm more compassionate than I was before. And if I can survive what I survived, you can survive whatever you're facing. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. Thank you for being part of the Tinty Tales family. With love and respect, I'll say goodbye for now, but I'll be back with more stories. More stories of women who survived impossible odds. More stories of people who chose healing over bitterness. More stories of hope and transformation. Tinty Tales, where real stories change real lives. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Trust your instincts. Protect your heart. And always, always ask for help when you need it.